Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode. This episode is the episode that everyone has been waiting on. Well, at least I know we have, because clearly at the ending of the first episode, so we had to wait 2 episodes just to have this conversation. My dad dropped a bomb on us, and none of us saw it coming. So we're going to talk about the impressionable years. So this is episode 3. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to talk about the impressionable years. You'll hear a lot of stories about some of the mistakes that we've made, some of the lessons learned, but also some of the challenges that we faced growing up. And this covers a wide range of years, but all of this is the march to manhood. So we talked about the beginnings, we talked about family dynamics. Now we're going to talk about the impressionable years, that all of these things that helped shape our journey to manhood. So Dad, I'm just going to call you out on this one because I need to hear some more about this. Now, you shared something. First of all, I'm going to have you share what you dropped on us on the way out of the first episode when we weren't recording.
well, what I shared was that my first encounter with marijuana, known as ganja.
Watch out now, people. Watch out. Everybody knows this man right here.
but going back a little before that encounter, I was out of school at that time. I was just hanging out. I mentioned earlier in a previous episode that my father was the custodian of the high school. So we were able to just hang out and play all kinds of sports there on the grounds and all that. So we would hang out with other guys. Some would come from different parts to ride around and talk. And we had a little place there where we had some mango trees and guineas and so on. And we would, in the summertime, we would go there and reap some of those fruits and come and sit and just talk, hang out, and so on. But in and among all of that, I grew up with strict parentage, religious parentage. So we were taught to. In fact, even the word hell, we couldn't even use that word. I mean, we couldn't use that word. You couldn't use the word damn or anything like that. You couldn't do that because that was a sin. I mean,
Wait, hold on. First of all, wait a minute, Dad. I gotta interrupt you there. Did anybody else feel very awkward in that moment?
Oh, sure enough. I was waiting to hear some scripture or something like that, like Balaam or something like that. And he just came out and said it. So I said, right.
You see, what happens is because those words were used in context of cursing. So they did not want us to use that. So even when we got in the Bible, reading in the Bible, and you saw those words, there was some kind of hesitation there because I mean,
over
it because you don't want to go to hell, so you don't want to use those words. So that was the framework in terms of religious atmosphere that I grew up in. So when some of those friends came around and we started hanging out and sat there in the cool of the day after school or in the evening and just hanging out there, some of those friends smoked. Now remember, because I'm from this religious family, that was not something that would be expected of us. In fact, um, one day, I think it was Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve. One of my friends who he really wasn't uh, into English so well in terms of his education, but he was heavy into science, and so he had a lab, and he was designing things and so on. And so I was hanging out with him, and his uncle was middle class family from, and so on. And so this particular weekend, Christmas Eve now, he invited us over, because when we were going to the fairs and all that, we would our parents didn't know this, but we would buy a beer here and there.
Uh-oh. Wait a minute.
That's two things now.
I know.
So my friend told his uncle that, we drink, so I didn't know all that was going to go down there with that. So they invited us over. My youngest brother and I went over with them, sat down, and we saw all this liquor on the table, different kinds of liquor. And being young, not knowing, and the dangers in that or whatever. Oh man, we're using one to pour in the glass and pouring another in the glass to mix it, and and we're going on. And I can tell you that the last thing that I remembered saying, the last thing I remember saying before I left this house was something like, "Oh, I'll see you," and it's more like a speakeasy type. I'll see you, something to that effect. And the next thing I knew, I that was like about maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And when I got awake in that night, it was just temporarily. I got awake and realized it was 9 o'clock in the night. I said 9 o'clock. But the following morning, I was so embarrassed because I had to do some cleaning.
So
so what happened was, but because my parents saw that, I made a vow that I would never do that again. And so I didn't do it again, and so on. But these friends, as I said, some of them smoke, the ones that would come up and hang out. But because we were doing sports and all of that stuff, we all were hanging out together. We were sitting under a tree that there was what you would call a little bayou or some, a bayou there, and a tree, and it had a little slope, and so there was a tree that kind of covered that particular area, and there were high grasses around and everything. And so we were sitting under there. The number of us, a few, 3, 4, 5 of us really. There was a man who would come by after school, and he rode a bicycle, and he had a some kind of container on the back. We call it a carrier or something, but he had in there peanuts and all that stuff. So he was hanging out with us down there, or we were hanging out with him, but we were down there. He lit up a what was supposed to be, or what we thought was one of those cigars that you roll up yourself. You roll it up in the paper yourself. You make it. It's not that it is bought that way. And so you made it, and so he hold that thing up, and he lit it. I mean, the scent was different than the regular cigarette, and real, and realized that it was marijuana, what we called at that time ganja.
God.
And so he had it in one one corner, and then we were in almost like a semicircle, and
So you were
so
in that puff pass rotation.
and yes, and he after he took his his, his puff of it and all that, he passed it around. And when it got to me, uh, training is good. It's important that that young people kind of listen to their parents as they godly parents when they uh, try to inculcate in them that which is good, because as I said, because of my background and all that, when that came to me and I realized what it was, um, I took it and passed it on to the others. I did not, and I'm glad I didn't, uh, take partake of it, because later on in life, questions that arose and you had to answer questions and applications or things like that, I was able to say. but
So you passed the test.
that was my test, my encounter
Yeah.
marijuana, and I'm glad I actually rejected it, and that spared me some heartaches.
So let's go around. So first of all, let's add the disclaimer that nothing is shared at that. Wait, how old is too old to get in trouble? First of all, I just need to make sure that I have complete immunity to what is being shared. I'll just play. So let's talk about that for a moment. We're talking about impressionable years. So I'll share one little story here, and then I want to hear from everyone else. But so we grew up in Houston, and we saw worlds that were a little different. Being a PK, for those who don't know, preacher's kid. During that time, you had a lot of pressure. Number one, because everybody looks at you. First of all, you have the stigma that PKs are the worst kids, and so now you try to balance. All right, well, do I want to avoid embarrassing my parents or avoid getting in trouble and figure out a way to do my dirt, or how is this going to work? So unfortunately, I took the path of dual lives, and that's where my church friends knew me as one person, and we went to public school at the time. Growing up, the first school we went to was public school. I won't call the name, but we lived down the street from the school, maybe about 5-6 blocks from the school. So my grandfather used to walk us to school. And what I will say is that I found a lot of money surrounding the first house or the last house right before I crossed the street to school. And you can imagine what was going on in that house. And I used to be very familiar with that house. But, there were a lot of influences at school, of course, because having, the neighborhood, you know, street pharmacist right on the corner allowed the exposure long before we should have been exposed to those type of things. So, they would come, to the basketball courts, play basketball, bring their 40 ounces and all these other, drinks around, gin and juice, all of that stuff around there. And of course, we as kids out there, we got curious. And of course, they would be out there, uh, with their transactions. And, we would be exposed to that as well. So, they would say, hey, you know what this is? No, not really. But here. look at this or smell this or try this. So we had that. I had that exposure from a very, very young age. And, that kind of changed my perspective on how I needed to be, because I felt like, okay, I needed to be cool. If I was not cool, then I had to move on. So I want to understand from your perspectives too, if you had similar, issues or encounters with different individuals from the school or from the neighborhood, community, even church.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, go ahead, Lester.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, as I said in previous episodes, I was very sheltered. My mom did a very good job of sheltering me a lot when I was young. So therefore, even at church, she had an eye on me all the time. So very, very sheltered. I went to a Christian school. Very sheltered. So and like I said before, neighborhood friends, saw them, but really didn't hang out with them either. So very sheltered. So really get an opportunity to really be influenced by them. But then in high school, I went to a public school like you did, and being so sheltered, it was eye opening. But I remember one time I was in the lunchroom, and I don't know why. You know what? I guess I wanted to be cool, so I got mad at something. I don't even remember what it was, but I got mad and I cursed for the first time out loud. And my best friend looked at me. Actually, no. The first thing, the cafeteria got quiet. They looked at me, and then my best friend looked at me and he goes, "Hey, man, that doesn't even sound right coming out of your mouth."
Yeah.
Because I'd never done that before. I guess I didn't have the right information. I didn't say it right. I don't know. But that's just kind of the life I had. Very sheltered. So even when I went to high school, you just didn't fit in because I was so sheltered. But that kept me out of trouble, I think. And then as far as I was an athlete in high school, so. This is back in the day when they allowed smoking. Believe it or not, there was a smoking section outside the high school where kids could actually smoke. But I was an athlete. I was on a track team, volleyball team. So, the people that were around me were like, "Look, man, our bodies are our temple. We want to do well on the track team. We want to do well volleyball." So that was never even a thought, because not a Christian thing or anything. Is like, I need to be at my ultimate health wise. So I never even had the thought. So I guess I would definitely encourage if you have kids, to put them into sports, because that's the positive peer pressure of what, we don't touch that stuff because we need to be athletes. If your kid's an athlete, I think it wasn't a Christian thing. It wasn't nothing like that. It was like, look, I need to be at my best. And so I didn't have those influences.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like when you read about Jesus, some people don't realize that Jesus had a very miserable childhood because people would tease him because he didn't do anything wrong. But like Gabriel said, pretty much I've done all that stuff. Now, because of raising, I didn't go too far, or maybe I wasn't in a group that encouraged me to do it too far. But and I'm not gonna go into every story, but I've tried to smoke oregano. Just trying it. I tried alcohol, right? I back in Miami. I mooned the bus, the public school bus. I moved it, that type of thing. I broke into a school to steal computers. I didn't go into school because erasing, that type of thing. I said, listen, I'll be outside and you can pass it to me, but I'm not going inside. So, but all of that was around, same thing like Gabriel cursing, same thing. I went to a public school. I picked up cursing to be tough, to fit in, whatever. Then when I went to private school, I kind of had to transition. The first couple of years, people used to love to hear me curse because I'd be crazy with my cursing and all that type of stuff, whatever. When I went to private school, but then when I got convicted of it, and I said, let's don't do that. Then I stopped doing that, that type of thing. So I could tell you that I don't know how Jesus did it, but I've seen myself that if I'm in certain circumstances, certain situations, and let's say I'm the only one, and I don't have anyone else of a positive influence, a lot of times I've done all those things that I just mentioned. So I could tell you that you have to be, it takes a special character person to be in the midst of being an oddball and not be nervous or not be scared to say, no, I'm not going to do it. That type of thing. Now it's a little bit easier for me when I'm older because I see more of those things as a witness type situation, and I'm not in those environments all the time. But yeah, when I was a kid, I did all those things, shoplifting, all that stuff, all because it was never in me, but because my friends were doing it, I turned around and did it. So
and when we talk about those type of things, right? The influence of around. I'll tell you from my perspective, balancing being the church life and the outside is a heavy, heavy burden. It's almost like, yes, you're raised a certain way, but you're torn because you want to, fit in and have the friends and enjoy that side of things. And so the pressure to keep both of those separate really started to weigh on me. And then eventually you started to see it cross over because at some point in time, there's only so much parallel.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing is,
you can't fake it that long.
Right. That's right. But the thing is, what we're discussing is not to glorify anything. It's just to indicate what life was like when we were growing up, and the impressionable years, as you said. Because I remember, now we have television and you can download movies and all those kinds of things. But when I was growing up, you didn't have that. So the first movie that I saw, actually, one of my older brothers, I was probably, I don't remember, maybe 15, and he took us to see. You may find this hilarious when you compare this movie to the movies today, but it was a movie called Please Don't Pick the Daisies by Doris Day.
Oh, man. Wow. Wow.
That was
oh my goodness.
To the theater to see that. But the thing is, it whet my appetite. So what would happen at between times? And as I said, this is just to tell you what went on. Is not to because these days things are different. But our room had this window that could be opened on both sides. You just open the window on both sides. Yeah. So and there's a latch. You close one side and then the other side that you close, then you push the latch down, and so it prevents anyone from opening the window from outside. So what we do is we'd close the window, but not put the latch down. So we were down through the window and to go and see movies. And in those days, you had like they would say a double bill or triple bill, meaning you see 2 or 3 movies in that one session. And so we go there, and so after the triple bill, and you're coming home, it's late. It's late, and when you got home, then you had to try to get through the window to get in. But I think if I recall correctly, one time window was closed, and I had to go through the door. And who was at the door? So
the sins of the father. That's a real statement. That's a real statement. No, but the crazy thing about this is, when we look at historical things, right? So we look at some of the stories that my dad is sharing, experiences that he's sharing. When I think about the things that I've done and that I've been around, it's crazy how I can look at it and say, man, you went through that too. I had no idea that you went through that when I was going through it. And so you start wondering about, well, what is generational? What does it mean to have like different tendencies to do things? And it's just I'm gonna say this because I had this conversation with my dad multiple times. I actually wish that he would have shared more of his stories and his experiences with me when I was younger than later on in life, because I think I would have been able to understand why I was drawn to some of those things. Would you guys agree? How do you feel about that?
And just before they respond, and one of the things that we have to be mindful of, even as parents, is our fears. Fearing that if I were to tell him some of these things, then it might get him so curious that he would go and do it. When
anyway, but I get where you're going with that.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I don't know. I don't know what the exact answer is, because sometimes I've had conversations with my children and they kind of say, "Well, Dad, you did X, Y, Z." Now, I don't know. I don't know if they're just saying it, to kind of joke or whatever the case may be. But but I shared with my children only because I understood the struggle. So, and with certain things or certain problems I've had, I did not want them to go through the struggle, because some of my struggles were of such where I told the Lord, I said, Lord, I don't think I'm going to be able to give this thing up. So I'm sorry. This thing has such a hold on me. I don't think I'm going to be able to give this thing up. And I'm crying in the middle of the night and all that type of business, whatever. And so finally I either grew out of it or I stopped it, praise the Lord, as far as that's concerned. And so that's why I was sensitive to my children, to where if I see them going down a road, I'm like, listen, you don't want to get involved in it, because I don't know if this is a Bible text or not, but the text, the phrase that says, by the grace of God go I, whatever it is, it's all the things that I have dabbled in. It's only that the grace of God that I was not attracted to that thing. Now I've never tried crack. I've never tried, marijuana, anything like that. So I don't know how I would respond to that. But I do know certain things that I have been addicted to, that I couldn't get rid of, that I tell myself, if other people have that type of addiction to other things, drinking, crack, music, pornography, whatever the case may be, then I can see how you don't want your child to even touch the thing, because you may not be able to let it go when you should let it go, or it may damage you in such a manner. So because of that, I purposely shared with my children certain things I went through, only so that they could have, so they could understand. I'm telling you from experience, you don't want to do it. You know, that type of thing. So,
Like I said, I think for me, I have a different perspective because I guess I was so sheltered. Um, so my dad was, he wouldn't even allow movies I remember when they found out I went to the movies, it was such a big deal. Like, but it was my dad. He was really all about, what, I'm a provider and I will discipline you. But he never told me stories about him growing up, and never told me about what he went through growing up. I mean, we didn't have that type of relationship. I think their method was, we're going to shelter you so much that the outside world is going to have very little influence on you. And I have to say, it probably did. I mean, yes, like I said before in another episode, I'm a loner a lot of the time because I was so sheltered. So, but on one end, some of these stories you guys talk about, I can't relate to that because I was so sheltered that I couldn't do some of those things. I think the worst thing I might have done is I was at a store and I wanted this little green car and I took it from the store.
Yeah.
When my mom was right there, I was sneaky. But that's the only thing I can think of at that age. A little older. I had my license. I wanted to pick up this girl I liked. So I took the car to go pick her up, and there was just a little bit of snow that day. As I parked the car, and my parents came home, and they're like, "You moved the car, didn't you?" All right, so I got busted, but that's probably the worst thing I did. Growing up.
Well, I want to ask you this. I want to ask you this, Gabe.
Mhm.
CJ said that he wished I had shared some of my experiences growing up with him. Just give him a perspective on life, and so that he would probably not take the direction that he took. Now, for you, how do you feel? How do you feel about the sheltering that you had, and how does that impact your relationship with your children?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think for me, um, it created that thing that I'm okay by myself, and that's probably not a good thing. But I don't really call my friends that often. I'm okay by myself. So I don't think that's a good thing as far as socialization. But on one end, like I said, I think if there the thought process was to, keep this kid away from everything. I guess that worked. um, but as far as what was your last question? I'm sorry.
How does it impact your relationship with your children? Uh,
Well, with my children, like I said in previous episodes, I love the Cosby Show because I love how Bill Cosby's character, you know, he had so much fun with his kids. I mean, they danced together, they sang together, they played ball together. So for me, I want that with my boys. So I want to get into all that. Now, as far as some of the things I went through, as far as growing up, I kind of try to give them, some insight on, growing up, what you need to do. But like I said, I think as far as that, I try to be close to my kids. I want to hear their side of the story. So I'm trying to change that a little bit. I'm not trying to shelter them too much. I don't want them to go through stuff, but
So, but what? Well, I want to go back to just say, I don't know if there's a perfect answer. I mean, I think the Lord just has to lead you. But going back to what Gabriel said, we've heard stories. If Gabriel is being as sheltered as maybe some people think he was sheltered, that he didn't go through any experience here. We've heard other stories of people that were sheltered that when they got older, they went buck wild. But you didn't. But so far, you haven't done that. You haven't done that. So for some people, sheltering too much makes the child go wild. For others, sheltering maybe kept you away from a lot of stuff, a lot of experiences. And yes, you made some adjust some things, but you didn't have to experience certain things, that type of thing, whatever. So, what's the answer? Should you tell your child a lot? Should you not? Maybe it's what you said, Gabriel, is you have to um be willing to share based upon the circumstances, based upon
Right. Right.
what your
Yeah.
child is going through and your family dynamics, whatever. But you have to be open. I think you said that you just have to be open. That's the key thing to decide how much to share.
I agree with that, and I'll amend my statement a little bit. I think situational definitely would have been good, but at the same time, as we shift gears to the relationship, right? Because you know, as parents, you guys as parents, and then as me, hopefully in the future, as I look at to think about the relationship with my dad, one thing that I can really appreciate is the fact that no matter what I did, my dad was the person that I could go to and say, you know what, this is what happened. This is what I did. I remember, and this is gonna be out there, but I remember when I got my first tattoo, and this was when I was away at college, and I'm sitting there in the chair. First of all, I could hear my dad's voice in my head telling me, "Son, should you really do this?" But I'm inside of there and I'm getting this tattoo and I'm happy. I look over at the tattoo artist and the table, and as I'm sitting in the chair and he's, tattooing my arm or my chest, I see a gun and drugs on the counter. And I'm sitting there thinking, I mean, now I'm sitting there, I wish I had listened to my dad. I don't know what's going on over here. Why did I even come in here? I started praying all types of prayers. Lord, just get me out of this situation. I don't know what he was talking about, how he was frustrated with life and how, he was frustrated with his, I guess, girlfriend or wife who had stepped out on him. And he was going there after he finished mine. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is not the person that I want to be with right now. So it was, but all of that to say, even in that moment, when I called my dad and I said, Dad, this is what I did. What my dad has never done is judged me. What my dad has never done is say, you're wrong for that. You shouldn't have done that. This, and that, and throw all these things at me. He listened to what I had to say, and it was only if I said, Dad, what do you think? Or anything like that, that he would really say, well, this is what I think. And it wasn't a judgmental talk. So how do you, that type of vulnerable relationship where I could just literally share anything with him, helped me navigate my many mess ups, in learning how to be. What do you think would have been different, or if that had happened for you, or how do you translate that to your kids now?
Right. You know, so like I said, I think early on it was all about, sheltering. But as I got
Yeah.
older, never made that shift to like, okay, now you're grown. Now you're 18, 19. Now, you know what? I'm going to start giving you advice. It always stayed that way where I am here again to provide. So therefore, help me with college, you know, obviously discipline is not an issue. I mean, I developed such a discipline as far as schoolwork. So you never have to
Right.
worry about, hey, you're not doing your schoolwork. They never had to come down to college. Graduated with a 3.4. So as far as that, so the discipline part wasn't really an issue. And because we hadn't developed that relationship, so then
Mm,
as a man now, when
mm,
I felt I needed advice, he wasn't the go-to person because we
mm,
never developed that relationship of, I think
mhm,
almost like you almost have to develop like a friendship once your kid gets to be an adult. You're
Yes.
still the
Yep.
parent, but
Yep.
mhm,
now you're your friend to give advice.
Yep.
To say, look, as a young man, I did this. You probably don't want to do that, and give advice. We never transitioned to that because for so long it was provider, disciplinarian, and we
mm,
never really shifted to friendship. Okay, as you're growing up. So now, not that I went broke wild, but there are things and mistakes that I've done as a young man that I
Mhm.
felt I feel now looking back I probably would not have done had I had
Mm.
advice from my dad or about hey, this is what I did.
Mm.
But I don't think he was that personality anyway. I don't think he was the type to tell me, well, as a young man, what Dad talked about, drinking. He probably did, but he's not the type to tell me those type of things. So
Mm.
now, yeah. So I made mistakes growing as a young man because I didn't have that relationship. We never transitioned to
Hmm. Lester, what would you say?
Well, my kind of what Gabriel said. My hope is that is not too late for me. Um, uh, when I talk about my parents, my mom, for whatever reason, approached me almost a little like Gabriel's situation, where she was critical, that type of thing. My dad on the opposite wasn't that way. My dad somehow had the ability, like Gabriel said, to make that transition into friendship when I got older. That I was still willing, like you, CJ, like I was willing to tell him anything. Dad, this is what I'm thinking about doing, blah blah blah, all that type of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so my hope is that with my kids, I'll be able to do that way. But in talking to my wife and also thinking about it myself,
Mhm.
I know that I'm a little bit critical on the children, and
Mhm.
I'm asking myself, where did I get that from? Why am I that way? You
Mhm.
didn't like it, so why are you that way? Whatever. But unfortunately, because of my family, my immediate family dynamics, I was working so much that I wasn't away and stuff like that. I'm a
Mhm.
very, I'm a very logical person, and
Mhm.
so I get upset when something doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And so sometimes when I'm speaking to my children, I'm giving them advice, and when they say stuff like my wife says sometimes just listen to them. They're just talking for the sake of talking. I'm like, well, I didn't grow up that way. I didn't talk foolishness. you know, you know, anything that came out of my mouth, I was responsible for. That type of thing. So I'm not trying to say something to get a rise out of my parents or something like that,
Mhm.
whatever. So a lot of
Mhm.
times I would get that way, and so I fight with. I did not want my kids to see me as, the mean parent and the
Mhm.
disciplinarian and the, doesn't laugh and all that type of stuff. But because
Yeah.
I was away so much, the only time I interacted them was when it was required a disciplinary thing. And
Mhm.
so, that's why I said I hope I'm not too late,
Yeah.
to make that transition or become friends and that type of thing. So, um, but again, I don't even know where I got it from because yes, I know one parent was critical. I know one was not, and because I despise being critical so much, how come I am still critical? That type of thing. So yeah, that's why I say I just hope it's not too late for me. But I agree with everything that Gabriel said in that you have to be able to transition to be their parent. I mean, to be, from parent to friend. And sometimes, just in case someone's listening, sometimes some parents stay there or are raised as their friend and not their parent.
Mhm.
I've seen relationships where
Yeah.
parents are sharing relationship information with their children,
Yeah.
meaning
N-
meaning their own relationship with their own husband and wife. I'm like,
No.
why is your children in your business?
Yeah.
10 and 13 and 14-year-olds should not be go get your dad from down the street, tell them to stop talking to them women. That doesn't make sense. You don't tell a child to go, yeah, because that child's going to disrespect their father or their
Yeah.
parent, whatever, and also they're not going to respect them, when they get older. So
Mhm.
I'm saying both sides is that I want to be I want to transition to my child's friend, and I don't know if I did it too early. Uh, Last thing I'll say is my wife has said, going back to if things don't make sense, if I get the feeling that you're going to do what you want to do, I say okay, fine, do what you want to do. When you get the results, that's fine. And so I've told my children, when you get 18, you can do what you want. And so now they're walking around. Okay, well, when I get 18, I'm just going to start doing what I want because they heard me say well, if you don't listen to me,
Yeah.
that's fine. But I'm tired of talking. And if you still want to do what you want to do, when you're 18, then you can do what you want. And so now, so my wife's like, don't say that to them. And I'm like,
yeah, in that vein, I'm curious as to have you seen some tendencies in your children that you had, the same tendencies that you had? Have you seen that in them, and how do you feel about them having those same tendencies?
yeah, and that's yes, I do see some of them, and that's why when we were talking about influence and doing bad things and stuff like that, I did not want my child to suffer the struggles I had, that type of thing. And so I tell them, listen, you don't want to get involved because of the tendency. I know. One thing I appreciate about the Henrys, me standing afar off, is when you all commit to doing something, y'all do it. Come how I was about to say, yeah, come danger or peace. You all commit to doing it. Now the hard part is getting y'all to agree that y'all need to do it. But once y'all set your mind on something, y'all do it. I'm not that way. And so me and my wife has had challenges where she'll say, "Well, stop doing that." I'm like, "Well, I'm trying. It's not like I want to do it, but it's something I'm struggling with." She's like, "Well, I just said I'm not going to do it. And I'm just not going to do it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, praise the Lord for you, but I'm not that way." That type of thing. I see CJ do it sometimes. I know Dr. Henry, you do it sometimes. So that's something I appreciate about you all. But I'm not that way, and so I see other tendencies with my children in that respect, and so I try to bear with them when it comes to stuff like that. But then it goes back to what I said. Am I too kind sometimes, where I don't give them discipline, where I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna do what I want, that type of thing. Like my son meat eating. I told him when you get older, you can eat meat, that type of thing. Because I wanted to give my children the chance to not, to grow up healthy, and then if you want to go that route, that's your choice. Me, I started eating meat and all that type of stuff, whatever. Not saying it's bad or good, but I started eating meat, whatever. Then I became vegetarian. Then I ate meat again. Then I became vegetarian again. So my kids were asking me, well, when can I eat meat? And I'm just like, for right now, when you get older. So now, as soon as my son got the age, boom, now that's all he's eating, that type of thing. So I'm just like, I guess that didn't work, that type of thing. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but yeah.
So Dad, but that makes me curious, because all of us have been talking about, the father to the son, or our experience with our father. But I'm curious, when I was sharing all those things with you all these years, from the day one, from the beginning years until now, what were you feeling inside? Because I mean, we went through a lot, and I've shared a lot.
Yeah, well, well, when you shared those things with me, because of my prayer life also, and what we have instilled in you, I believed that everything was going to be okay, even though I did not want you to do what you did. But you did it. Look, if you have already done it, then I mean, it's not going to make any sense to quibble over it or anything like that. Maybe encourage you to perhaps put a break on, put some brakes on it, so you don't go any further. But what sense would it make to even try to, say anything negative? Just encourage you, in the right path and so on, because you have already done it. So nothing that I could do would prevent it, because it's already done. So the love, just keep loving and encouraging you, and believing that everything is going to be okay. And
Man, I'll tell you that response right there is why I kept coming back. Like, no matter what I did, I knew that I could at least go to my dad and say, Dad, this is the case. And not that I couldn't go. Well, no, I couldn't go to my mom. I'll just be honest about that. My mom, my mom is a wonderful, wonderful small lady, but she packs a lot of spice. And so I love her to death. But that reaction would not have come from my mom. but Gabe, so from your perspective, do you see some tendencies with your kids, and then also, like, how do you think you would respond as they share things with you more openly, like new discoveries, new things?
Right. I mean, so yeah. I mean, I think with our kids, you definitely see part of you. I mean, that's what we do. We pass some of our DNA to our kids. So you're definitely bound to see some of those tendencies in your kids. And when I see those things, I try to go back and how did I deal with it, and try to I think it's I think going back to what Lester talked about, it's a thin line when you got to figure out, okay, when do you listen, when do you discipline, when do
Mm,
you give advice, when do
mm-hmm,
you punish, how do you punish?
mm-hmm.
um, uh, you've seen it with your parents sometimes. At least in your mind, they felt too strict. You're like,
Yeah.
well, okay, so how do you do it with your kids? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you feel like, oh, I'm a little soft compared to what my parents did, or I'm too tough. So you try to find that middle, that middle ground. I think as a parent, you just have to, and then kids are different. My oldest, I know what buttons to push from to get in line. The same buttons with the second one doesn't work. So
Mhm.
then you have to find another way to deal with him.
Mm-hmm.
How his personality. So it's a very fine line as far as that. I would say, as far as them coming to me, again, I have two boys. I think the oldest, Papa, so he's always, the second one, he does pop up, but it seems to lean more towards mom, which is fine. I mean, so, um, for me, like I said, I want to get to that point where we have a friendship,
Yeah.
where yes, I'm here to discipline you, but you know what? If you need some advice, my oldest, he already has pretty much a target what he wants to be as far as career, which is good. So,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of interact about that and try to encourage him. So it's really, that's where prayer life, asking for wisdom on how to when do you become a disciplinarian, when do you become a friend to your kids, So that's what I pray for, because it's not easy. It's not easy, So you can't ever judge your parents, because they raised you the way they were raised. Like my dad, in that Haitian culture, I've talked to many men who've had Haitian fathers, and they tell me the same thing. Their dads were disciplinarians, providers. That
Mm-hmm.
was their relationship. So what can they do? They're going to pass that on to you. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's maybe just because of the Cosby Show, I want something different. Had I not seen that on TV, I might be the same way. You know what? Disciplinarian, provider. That's it. But I saw something else, and I said,
Yeah.
I want to be something else. So,
Well, that's good. I know we're coming to a close here, and we're going to wrap up. Last thing on the way out, in a short response, would you change? And I think we need to, we got into a lot of the parenting styles, well, which is good. We're going to see more of in a later episode. But going back to the impressionable years, would you change anything that has happened to you? Hindsight is always 2020 now, but looking back, would you change anything that you went through or that you experienced?
Yes. Well, that's
Interesting.
all I can tell you. Yeah, all I can, yeah, all I can tell you is yes. Now, certain things I wouldn't change because I wouldn't be who I am, but other ones, yes. You know, and I'll just tell this phrase, and then I'm gonna stop. When I was at school, there was this guy that I talked to that used to play the drums, right?
Mhm.
And you know, the Lord impressed him. He used to play the congos. That's what he used to play, the Congo drums, or whatever.
Mhm.
And he said to me one time, he said, Lester, even though my heart is converted, my hands are not.
Mm.
And so he said sometimes or he decided not to play them because his hands weren't converted. They would always go back to what he learned to do, whatever that case may be, whatever, even though his heart's converted. And so I want to end with that to say
Mm.
that I would like to change some things only because it damaged my hands. My heart
Mm.
might be in the right place now, but now my hand is damaged to where now I can't participate in certain things. I can't do certain things. I
Yeah.
can't, dabble in certain things. Not saying you should dabble, but I can't be
Yeah.
close to certain things because it may drag me right back to something that I don't want to be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, wow, that's powerful. Who's next, Dad or Gabe?
Well, the episode or experience I had with my friend who took me to his uncle's house to drink that Christmas Eve. If I mean, if I could reverse it, I would reverse it, because the only thing is that my parents, though, somehow they they thought of it as, because they were experienced, or they knew about um, having punch, and pouring alcohol in
rum,
punch.
Punch.
So he said, so I think my mother said that, oh well, that's what happened, and perhaps I didn't know.
They gave you the benefit of the doubt. Oh
I
man.
was like,
yeah, they'll give you the benefit of the doubt.
yeah, and so okay, then that gives me, that kind of gives me a way to
And out.
not doing it again. So that I would reverse. Um, Also, I didn't say this before, but when we were sitting at the school yard, in the periphery of the play field and so on. Next to that was there was a club where they planted some coconut trees, but they were the dwarf coconut, they call them, trees. So you could stand and just pick the coconuts. And so we would have a field day going over there, picking the coconuts and coming over and sitting down and eating them. They were not ours, so we shouldn't have been doing that. And so that I would reverse if I could. But in terms of major things that would have gotten me in big trouble, and I didn't really have that. So it's not much to reverse on that.
Mhm.
All right. Gabe.
I mean, as far as me, I mean, I wouldn't reverse certain things, and I would reverse others. Being sheltered the way I was uh, kept me out of trouble. I mean, when I went to college, you know, um, I gravitated to people who didn't do drugs. I gravitated to people who didn't drink because I was so sheltered. Because when you get to college, you're on your own.
That's right.
So you will gravitate to what you were in high school. So again, being an athlete, this and that. I mean, when your eyes are open when you get to college. So now you could be in any group. There are people who drink, people who smoke, people who do other things, who fool around in school, whatever. Um, so it gave me direction so that I was very responsible in college, and so that part, looking back, I wouldn't change it. What I wish, and I don't know how things would change had my mom been a little more loose as far as being able to interact. with friends and you know having being more social on one aspect. So yeah, I guess I guess we'll never know, you know, what that would have been like. But my mom, even though she was very like, you know, as an adult, she transitioned more into a friendship where I could speak to my mom, and she was very accepting. Any girlfriend that I brought, like, look, as long as she loves you, I'm good. She never talked bad about any of the people I dated or anything like that. So she transitioned, I think, to more of a friendship, even though she was very um, sheltering growing up. Um, so as far as that, so yeah, only the social aspect, you know, I think that might have changed. But then again, who knows what those changes would have created? So, but otherwise, you know, I am who I
So
am because of that. So,
so I'll say for me, I'll say that I would not. I would change some things. I take that back. I would change some things, and you'll hear, you know, in later episodes, kind of the story as we get towards, you know, manhood and courting and marriage and all of that. There are some things that I would change, but the bulk of my life, I think I would not change it because every experience helped me learn a lesson. Now, if I hadn't learned a lesson from every experience, that'd be a whole nother story. Yeah, I'd change all of it. But I think I learned a lot from that. But I know we've got to wrap up here. But again, I'm excited for what's to come because, you know, we got through the impressionable years and we're going to start looking at some other interesting topics. Some of these we're going to have to split up in two, especially when we get to trauma. Trauma is going to be a very big episode, or, you know, two-part episode where we will have our first guest kind of sharing their story about their childhood trauma, and then we'll be able to discuss it and kind of have a round table on it and share some of our trauma and how we went through it. So you don't want to miss it out, you know, miss out on it. But thank you again for joining. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for being vulnerable in this space. 4 mics, 4 men. I can always count on you guys, so I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining in. And until the next episode drops, we shall see you. Take care. Have a good night.
All right. Love y'all. All right.
All right.